Hello there and happy Thursday. I'm your host Shayrenee and welcome to the premiere of the Indie Spotlight Special Edition Thursday or Thursdays. Today we're having a very special guest. His name is Benack the third. He is very, very talented jazz musician, trumpeter, and composer. And we will be welcoming him here. I'm excited to interview him, and we'll just be waiting until he steps into the room, and then we'll be start talking to him and asking him questions, seeing what he's been up to. Okay, guys, I hope you guys' week and Thursday is going well, and I hope your weekend will be doing even better. So, um, so while we're waiting for Benny to come into the room, I'll tell you about us having a very, very fun-filled and exciting week for the Indie Spotlight and the Indie Spotlight Special Edition. Friday, we are having Wild West Bandit and the Real Swami at 7 p.m. Today, we're having Benny Benack the third. Saturday, we're having Young Shotty. And Sunday, we are having Dr. Garfield Bright. And I'm very excited to be interviewing everybody. We'll just be waiting for our guests to come in. Thank you, everyone. Want to make sure I say hello to everybody because sometimes when I'm doing the interview, I can't always say things. So, hey there, Benny. I'm gonna okay, there you go. Hey,
Hey girl, what's happening?
hey. How are you? I'm good. How's your Thursday going?
Everything's good. I just had like this crazy trip. I actually flew to California on Monday and played
Oh, wow.
like an outdoor concert on Tuesday, and then
Oh,
slept 2 hours and then flew back to New York yesterday. So I'm
wow.
I'm still catching up. I'm getting back on East Coast time, but I'm feeling pretty good.
You're feeling fine now?
I'm
Sure.
vaccinated too. Anybody that's watching, they should know, I'm not just hopping on planes willy-nilly. I'm vaccinated.
That's awesome. So, tell me what area you're from, because I actually looked up and it says that your I think your grandfather
Yeah,
he was he was a pretty famous musician.
three generations of jazz in Pittsburgh. So I grew up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I mean, like grew up in the suburbs, but was always going into the city because that's a really good jazz town in Pittsburgh, actually. For like a small city, there's a lot of good culture and music there. Like a ton of famous jazz people came from Pittsburgh. So there's like a really rich history there. And I still go back, if it's not for the pandemic, it's not that far from New York City. I would go back, you know, every couple of months and play gigs there. So, my
Sure.
still lives in Pittsburgh and plays the saxophone. He still does gigs now. So when I come home, I get to play with him. It's great.
That's awesome. That's cool. Um, I spent a few semesters at Temple University.
Really?
I went there. Yeah, I went there for music education first, but then I quickly transferred over to jazz vocal to major in jazz vocal performance. And
That,
I know it is a very it's what I want to say. The oral theory is pretty complicated. Okay, but it's pretty complicated. It's very complicated. So you're a trumpetist and you're also a vocalist, which I find that a very kind of to me a little rare combination. I know Chet Baker and I know Louis Armstrong is, but I just find that pretty fascinating.
yeah, there is, for whatever reason, there's something about the trumpet where like a lot of trumpet players end up singing. You mentioned Chet Baker, Louis Armstrong. Those are the ones
Mhm.
people always think of. Also, like Louis Prima, you know, like I'm
Mhm.
just a gigolo everywhere I go. That guy, he would play trumpet and sing too. Even Dizzy Gillespie sang a little. So
Mhm.
there's like history there of like
Sure.
trumpet players who also sing. And I don't know what it is about the trumpet that makes everybody want to sing, but you know, I've always done both. So they've always been kind of like equal parts of my heart, you know?
You know, I think like for some reason, like when we used to like do like jazz theory or we used to sing and stuff in like jazz ensemble, it would double the voice. And I noticed that a lot of like a lot of jazz vocalists, some female jazz vocalists, would actually look at the like the solos of the trumpeter and actually like mimic them
Yeah,
and
they're
stuff.
kind of the same range, you know? It's like in the same.
Yeah,
So I think that's why the trumpet, like a lot of people, you end up singing it because it's kind of like the same vocal register.
yeah, yeah. Thank you everybody for joining. I forget to say that sometimes. And I'm excited to be interviewing Benny. Um, so tell me, like, do you have any well, first I'll start with this. Where can people actually find you at? Because I see a lot about you. So where can people find you at?
Well, you know, I live in New York City, and even during the pandemic, I've managed to hold on to a couple residencies where they have like outdoor seating, so people are able to come, you know, even if you're not comfortable sitting inside or whatever. And so
Mm-hmm.
Sunday night show at a bar in Morningside Heights, like kind of by Columbia University, called The Craftsman, and we
Mm-hmm.
indoor, outdoor, rain or shine there every Sunday night in New York. Actually, tonight after this, a couple blocks from my apartment in Harlem, I play at a jazz club called Minton's, and
Right.
you know, it's like a few blocks away from the Red Rooster in Harlem, and we do a Thursday night jam session there, and they're back to like 50% indoor occupancy. So
Oh wow.
way back, but if people are vaccinated, if they're comfortable inside, you know, we do that on Thursdays. So I'm gonna like throw on a suit after we finish talking and like walk over.
I know. Yeah, yeah, you're pretty busy. I've never really been to New York, but I've always wanted to go and especially to experience, somewhere that has like a lot of like rich music history,
Are you in
especially jazz.
Philly now, or you were just there for school?
So no, I live in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I also this is another story. So my mother, when she was younger, she grew up next door to Lee Morgan, his brother and his mother.
Whoa, no
Uh
way.
huh. Yeah, she knew them. Yeah. And I was looking at they had a really good series, like I think it was on Netflix. It was a really good series,
That
and I
doc-
really really enjoyed it.
I saw it. It's incredible.
Yeah. So like I know me and you can dive into a whole lot of jazz history, so let me hold off on that. Let me hold off on that. And I want to add, could you tell people where they can find you on social media? I like to normally um talk about
Yeah,
that so that
but
people can like get
I'm
access
grabbing
to
my
it.
camera. I'm just gonna put it in my put it on the in the comments, and I'll just put my website and my IG name
Oh,
is
sure.
actually the same, like for all my socials, for Twitter, my YouTube channel. You know, I put a lot of video content on YouTube, and it's the same as my
Oh,
Instagram.
let me pin that. Hold on. Let me get that and pin that. That comment is better. Yeah, there you go. I
Yeah,
pinned it.
my website and all my socials, YouTube, everything is jazz. So I try and keep it real simple. You know.
I heard like that you did a lot of like you've been with a lot of big bands and you've traveled a lot, but I heard that like you worked with Josh Groban.
Yeah, you know what's funny is actually Josh Groban was a student at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh for one semester, and my mom was his private voice teacher. She's like a opera, classical, music theater voice teacher. So
Oh
she
wow.
he was her private student, and she said that he was great. Like even back then, everybody knew he had this amazing voice, but it was time at the end of the year. I mean, you were a vocal major, like for his jury, he had to like do his jury for all the teachers and get a grade. And apparently, he was singing some really popular opera song, but he didn't bring music for the accompanist, for the pianist. And
Mm.
pianist, like he'd been doing it for 50 years, he knew the piece. But the rule is if you don't bring music for the accompanist, they can't play for you. So he had to do his jury a cappella without the pianist. And even though he sounded great, my mom was like, Josh, I love you. I love your voice, but you know, I have to give you an F. Like you didn't, you didn't bring the music. You failed, you didn't do it. So would have had to come back the next year, and he would have had to redo a couple things to like pass his freshman jury. But then he got discovered by David Foster and Sony Records, and he went off and became famous, and he never even had to go back to school. But later on, years later, I got linked in with him through Chris Bodie, the trumpet player, who recorded with him. But
okay, yeah, I've heard of Chris Bodie
concerts. So they called me to play like Chris Bodie's solos. And I didn't know if Josh was going to remember my mom or anything when I met him at the rehearsal, at the sound check. And I was like, hey, I'm Benny Benack. My mother is Claudia. And he was like, oh, my God, your mom's Claudia. I love her. Tell her how's she doing. So it was really great. And, I got to work with him on a little bit of touring and some concerts. And he's super down-to-earth, funny guy. And, that was super fun.
Awesome. So is there any, like, I see that you've made, tell me like about like the albums that you have made and like where you can get them on Spotify and stuff. You can just put your name in Spotify or?
Yeah, everything is like Benny Benack III. And my last record came out in January before COVID. So I was able to do a release concert at Lincoln Center in New York, went home to Pittsburgh, did a release concert in February, did a Valentine's Day show, and then after that, the world stopped. So the album, A Lot of Living to Do, the one that I put out, has done really well on streaming, but I had like a whole year of touring plans. I was going to sell a lot of CDs. That all got canceled. But the record features Christian McBride on bass, who's like one of the, godfathers of Philadelphia jazz. So I had to get some Philly in there, some Philly swing. And that album is called A Lot of Living to Do. Everything is on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, you name it. It's also on YouTube. You can just listen to it for free out there,
Do you have any merchandise for sale?
Well, Shay, as a matter of fact, I do. Look, I'll just grab one. This is what I like to call the hashtag BB3T. Okay, this is my T-shirt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like it.
Custom design. And then, I have the T-shirts, and I also sell the physical copies of my CDs for my website. I always write everybody a little note, and I autograph the CD and thank everybody for supporting, because it's been such a crazy year. So anytime somebody can buy one CD or buy a T-shirt or something, that goes right to the rent,
So due to like COVID-19 happening and everything like that, where do you see the future of like live performance and music and stuff like that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one thing we've all learned is that like Zoom and, online concerts, live streaming, like who even knew that was a word until last year? But I think that's here to stay, because for a lot of artists, like me, that were just so focused on touring and playing live for people, that's going to be really important when we can all do that again. But even further than that, like you'll be able to do a concert in New York City and then live stream it. And then, in Tokyo, it's 8 a.m. All your fans in Japan are just waking up because it's 9 p.m.
Sure.
So you do a live concert and you live stream it. Now it's just like supplemental income, because people can donate, people can support, people give tips online. And now even maybe a venue that before they wouldn't take a risk on like a younger artist because they needed to make their money. So they just want to book like established people. Now maybe, this is a younger artist, but they seem to have like a good Instagram following. I'm looking at their Spotify numbers and they have a lot of different countries, chance on them doing a live show, and they'll get good numbers on our live stream and we can make our money that way. So I actually, the online thing is actually going to help us when we live touring and concerts, because you can just kind of like do a hybrid. you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think that is a very good idea. That's actually why I started the Indie Spotlight after what happened, because there was so many like great musicians and just talented people, businesses, restaurants, and all those people that I felt like, needed to be exposed and people need to know
Totally.
that they're there. um, so um so I wanted to ask, like, so how, like, when did you first pick up like your trumpet and start playing and start singing?
Well, I mean, I was always singing. That was like
Okay,
from the womb.
that was a theory. Okay.
Always.
Okay.
My parents had I have an older sister. Both of us started piano when we were like 5. So she's older than
Oh
me by
wow.
years. But we took classical piano and like I never practiced, I just wasn't into it. It was boring. And then, when I was in second grade, I was like 8 or 9, I started playing the trumpet. And most students, if you pick up like violin or, you play the flute in band class in school, they usually start you in like 4th grade, I think. But for me, I started in second grade. So even back then, I was like, trying to get like a head start. And I was in second grade, but I was playing in band with the 4th graders, like trying to, catch up to everybody. So once I started trumpet when I was about 9, then all of a sudden it was really fun and I liked practicing. So gradually piano kind of faded out and I,
Hmm.
fell in love with trumpet. But now, of course, the ironic thing is I've been playing a lot of gigs on piano this past year just
Oh
to,
wow.
and I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have like learned the scales with the right fingers. Like I'm fumbling all over the piano and I'm like, damn it, I should have paid attention when I was 5.
um do so do you play, so most of like mostly when you like play out, do you normally play out mostly in like in New York, because it's a really really busy city and it has so many opportunities for
Yeah.
music and
I,
musicians?
I mean, I always say, even during the pandemic, if you think every city is at 50% or 25% of what they normally are, you know, New York 25% is still going to be that much more culturally rich than like
Sure.
smaller, less dense cities. So, like for example, in Pittsburgh, where I grew up, there's like one jazz club and like a couple hotels that have jazz. So if that one jazz club is at 25%, that's it. That's 1/4 of what they normally have. In New York, you have like 40 jazz clubs. So if you have 25% of that stay open, even in the wintertime, when it was 20 degrees outside and it was only outdoor dining, I still had a gig at a jazz club twice a week. And people would go out in coats and hats and mittens eating chips and guacamole, in 20-degree weather just to hear the music. And I was playing my trumpet.
Mm,
The buttons were going to freeze because it was so cold out. But
mm,
people still wanted the music. People still wanted that culture. And in New York, it's never going to change. New York is always going to be like that heartbeat for culture.
mm.
Even in a
That's
pandemic.
wonderful.
Oh, you got to come visit. Come hang out with me and sing a song.
Definitely, I was about to say, like, so hopefully like I could work with you
Yes.
and we can like work together or like do something together, because I would like to come out there.
I come to
What?
once a month.
Go
I
ahead. I'm sorry.
play at Chris's once a month, and
Oh, you
they're
play at Trix's Jazz Cafe?
once a month. I'm gonna be there on Saturday, but they don't have a live audience yet. But in May,
Oh,
they're
okay.
going back to live audience. So you got to come out in May and come and sit in and sing a song with me. I'm
Okay.
up. You got to do it.
You have to do it. Oh, I mean, I think that would be very exciting. I haven't literally been to anywhere or any concert. I can't even remember the last time I actually went out and actually listened to any live music, because it's just like it was life and then there was COVID, you
Right.
know? There's so
I've been
good.
talking to the guys from Chris's Philadelphia. They've had some difficult laws about concerts where it's like either you're allowed to serve food or you're allowed to have a concert, but like you can't do both. So for a place like Chris's, that's like a restaurant and a jazz club, they like didn't know what to do. So they've just been doing live streams, but they're going
Mm,
to start having real people back like next month. So that's exciting.
yeah. Yeah. I wanted to also wanted to ask you that what is like the best advice you would give someone who oh God, this is a two question.
Okay.
Yeah, this is two questions. Okay. The first one is, what is the best advice you would give someone that is in like the music industry? And then what's the best advice you would give someone that is in the jazz, like doing jazz music?
Well, let me go backwards. Let me start with jazz. Because
Okay.
jazz is like, it's a much smaller circle,
Yeah.
you know, like
Mm-hmm.
jazz world is
Mm-hmm.
a small town. Everybody knows everybody's gossip and everybody knows everyone. So, you know, you can get by a lot more on like word of mouth and building a reputation, you know, that way. Where if you play with one guy in Philadelphia, all of a sudden everyone else in Philadelphia is going to talk to that guy and be like, oh, you played with this trumpet guy. Could he play trumpet? Was he a good singer? You know, then all of a sudden now you know 15 people in Philadelphia. So in jazz, it's really important to like, you know, to network with people that you play with, you know, because it's such a small world. So if you meet one guy in Philly, you know, he might have 5 friends and now all of a sudden, you know, 5 more people. And then outside of jazz music, you know, it becomes less about like direct person to person, musician to musician kind of like, you know, word of mouth. Because
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to be a pop star or you're playing rap music, or you're a DJ or an MC, it's like you're not just in this tiny little circle. Like you're in this huge pool of artists,
Yeah.
you know? It's
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
all about like what's your brand and like how curated is your social media, because like if you're a girl that like wants to play folk music and, you know, play the ukulele like Taylor Swift or Zoe Deschanel, like there's like a million girls that do that, you know? So you have to really kind of like find what you can do that makes you unique and kind of like highlight that. And, you know, there's just so much more. It's so more saturated, you know. It's like you're a tiny little needle in a haystack. But in jazz music, you can get noticed, you know, a lot faster because it's like a small world. So I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of friends and a lot of musicians that, you know, they are great jazz artists, but they also have aspirations to kind of break into other types of music. Like they want to put out music that's more like R&B, and they're a vocalist and they don't want to do jazz standards. They want to write their own music and do R&B. Or, you know, musicians that play a lot of jazz music, but like they want to be more like in a band or play rock or so, anything, you know? And I
Mm-hmm.
say like, you should just use jazz's tiny little pool and like get some clout in jazz. And then you can like leave jazz and go into that much bigger pool. But at least if you have a bit of a reputation in jazz, you can fall back on that. Because if you go
Sure.
straight into the deep end of like, I want to be the next, you know, Taylor Swift or the next J. Cole or whatever, like now you have to compete with like a million different other people instead of like 100, you know?
Definitely. Cool. So I don't know if there was any I didn't know if there was any questions that you would like to ask me or not. I normally ask that during the interview because I'm normally asking so many questions. But they're like um it's like the questions that I normally ask is like questions I would personally ask the person.
Sure.
But I normally give them the opportunity to
Well, let
if
me
they want
ask
to.
you this, because I did my research, you know, I did my homework. I've checked out some of your other interviews, and it seems like you have like a really eclectic mix of artists. Like it's
I do.
not just
Hmm.
jazz, or even not just you know, like, you know, oral artists, like different disciplines and stuff. So like
Hmm.
how do you develop such like an eclectic taste? Like it seems like you have like hands in all these different, you know, styles of music and arts and culture.
Hmm.
Like, were you always like that? When did that start for you?
So first, I'm glad you noticed all that. I'm glad you noticed that. And I listened to all kinds of music and I sang all types of music. Um and I noticed that like a lot of times with music they're heavily like genre based, and I like to think that like music of all kinds should be a community,
Yeah.
and we should all know and we should like all like we should all know each other, and that
Yes.
a lot of people that do other music don't know about how essential and how unique like jazz history is. In fact, jazz history is even so rich in like Black or African American history.
Oh my God. Yeah,
And it's so it's so fascinating. I just it was just so fascinating for me. And so I listen to all kinds of music. I listen to rock, I listen to jazz, I listen to metal, I listen to old soul, I listen to R&B, I listen to rap. So I also wanted to make it a space for like musicians of all type of genres and from all places and facets to come together and to watch each other and not just to make it one thing. Even though one thing is not bad either, you know.
well, let me ask you a question, because you brought up something that, you know, over the past year, not only have we been dealing with the pandemic, but of course, all of the, you know, things that have been happening in this country with Black Lives Matter and all of these social issues that, you
Hmm.
know, are happening, you know, in the courts and the news this past week with everything that's been happening at
Sure.
top, you know, and being in
Hmm.
the jazz community, like you mentioned, jazz is such a part of like the story of Black America. There's
Hmm.
a lot of musicians in jazz that they don't call it jazz, they call it Black American music, and that's like a hashtag bam that this trumpet player
Hmm.
Peyton came up with like 15 years ago. And, you know, there's a whole, you know, slew of people that are dedicated to like telling the story of jazz as this like Black American art form. And obviously
Hmm.
for me, that's something that is like, you know, you can't play jazz music without being aware of that and trying to understand it and promote it. So something that we see, like, you know, you were at Temple, I was at Manhattan School of Music, and like
Hmm.
one of the critiques of like jazz education and like music schools is that we have this music that was created by, you know, Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald and Miles Davis and John Coltrane and all these like gods of Black American culture and music. And then
Hmm.
a lot of times in these music conservatories, the faculty is a bunch of white people, and the student body, like a lot of the students in jazz education now that are graduating with degrees, it's like overwhelmingly, you know, European and white cultures. And, you know, jazz is Black American music. I believe that 100%, you know? And so what are some things for you as somebody that has an appreciation for all these different genres of music? Like, what do you think jazz can do or needs to do to like connect more with, you know, the next generation of listeners that, you know, are Black and love and celebrate all the other forms of Black American music? Like, what does jazz need to do to like get with the times, you know? Because the
What does
audience
it need
is
to do?
old, right? And jazz needs to like cultivate its audience with the new generation.
Um, this is a really good question that you actually have for me because I know you actually teach master classes, right?
Yeah, I do. I try and do education stuff, and I'm always thinking about like we need to keep jazz, you know, relevant to the times. We need to be appealing to like the next generation, because, you know, I did this concert in Newport Beach yesterday, and it was a lot of old white people, and you know, they're not going to be around forever to buy my CDs. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. That's interesting.
So
Uh,
have to find a way to like modernize jazz. You know, like what can jazz do? That's
I
what I
think
keeps me up at
I,
night.
you should. So, what I think could happen is that places or institutions could be less focused on um less focused on maybe like hard theory and less focused on hard and complicated theory, and let's start speaking and talking to vocalists and musicians and trading ideas and letting how do I want to say this, letting them like get a feel for like what they feel like is jazz or what they're singing that is jazz. Like when I talk a lot, I would speak a lot of times I would speak about Black female vocalists. Um so I would often look into like the life and times of Lady Day, and also like Donna Washington.
Yes.
So, and you know, something that was really like unique about like Billie Holiday's voice is that she didn't like do like certain types of what do you call it, solos. She
Yeah.
was able to like color her voice. So she did her solos very differently. And that's something that is not really much explained in jazz.
Oh,
That it's not one suit of wear, like it's not one way of doing, it's not one way of soloing, because a lot of her stuff like you might want to do, but it's not like showing enough. Like if you did it, it's not like showing enough about how you can do a solo. So you would be more referred to do another song,
right.
maybe by Ella Fitzgerald or Sarah Vaughan or someone like that, or what is like someone
Right.
or other like other people or other vocalists that had more like of a solo thing and
Right.
stuff like that. So I feel like it should be a little bit less hard on the vocalists, and so a little less hard on the vocalist, be a little more open, little less strict, and you know, let vocalists and people feel for what they want to do. At
I
least I
agree.
know a lot of things that was different. I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but I knew like a lot of things on. I spent about 2 semesters at Temple University,
Yeah.
um, but that's like how I feel about that's pretty much how I feel.
I was just going to agree with you. I mean, I think part of the problem is when you take an art form like jazz and you say, okay, now you're going to pay $35,000 a year to get your degree in this. You know, they have to like find a way to like make a syllabus, and they have to like put it in a classroom. And the way that they did that is by turning it into like, a theory class. And if you look at a lot of the jazz musicians who created the music, they weren't sitting there with, a whiteboard in a classroom talking about it like it was mathematics. Like they heard it, they felt it. It was their experience. They did it intrinsically. They did it naturally. And a lot of my heroes, a lot of great jazz musicians, they couldn't read music. Like they didn't know what C minor 7 was versus a D major 7 with a flat 9. They didn't know any of that. They just heard,
Sure.
felt, and played. And that is one thing that I think, gets overlooked in jazz education. And as we try and like bring more people into jazz music, is that it just gets a little bit too, like you said, like just a little too like esoteric. And we need to like bring it back to like jazz was like music for people. Jazz was like party music.
Mhm.
People were dancing. Like people went to jazz concert to like have a good time. They didn't go there to like sit in a seat and just be really quiet the whole time and like clap. It was like it was community. It was part of their life experience. And I think you can learn more about jazz music by going out to a concert and feeling the energy in the room and watching someone play than you would ever get in a classroom talking about scales. I really believe that. So I mean, I think both are important, but
Mhm.
I think if you're a jazz, you're someone that's like, I want to get more into jazz. I like
Mhm.
Sarah Vaughan. Where do I start? I would say like, yeah, like learn about the theory, but also you just got to get out there and feel it, and feel what the spirit of jazz is. And that take you way more than like, theory homework. I
Sure, sure. I'm glad that you agree. I'm glad that you understand understand where I'm coming from, because like a lot of my like a lot of my classmates, they were able to like they was able to bust their theory out and everything like that. And I was like, well, I can bust a song. So
hey,
I can bust I can kill us
we are we
front, but
in this class? Come on.
yeah, but I do feel like both sides are important depending on what you're trying to do. I think that they should make some degrees that are more vocal focused,
Yeah.
and yeah, like make it a little more comfortable.
Yeah. More relatable.
For them.
Totally.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Um. So that was okay. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting people's questions up here.
Homies.
So what type of style do you feel like, or would you say like you sing?
I think I'm, if you got to put me in a box, I would say it's like, no, it's fine. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with it. Like, I think I'm a crooner, and
Hmm.
that just means coming out of like, you know, Tony Bennett, Michael Bublé, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby. Like, that's kind of how like the tree goes out. And,
Hmm.
that kind of comes from, when jazz was kind of popular music, like
Hmm.
Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra, like they had TV shows. They were like,
Sure.
chart #1 records. So my
Sure.
style of singing really comes from like that crooner. To me, it just means like where jazz is kind of like,
Oh yeah.
popular music,
Oh
And
well, yeah.
if
Yeah.
I'm playing like, if I'm doing a wedding gig and somebody wants me to do Bruno Mars and they want me to do like, Brown Eyed Girl and Van Morrison and, I can sing all these other styles.
I'm sure. I was about to say. I know you. Yeah. I was
If
about to say like if.
it's a birthday and I got to do it, I will. I'll do some, some Elton John, some Stevie Wonder, whatever you want. But I think like
Hmm.
kind of my comfort zone is really kind of like, coming out of that kind of like timeless classic era of like 40s and 50s where like they were singing like the Great American Songbook in a particular way, So I'm kind of like throwback with my style of singing.
Yeah. I think that as long as you're able to do it well, that's what you're able to do well. And I have heard your music, and it does sound very good.
Well,
It does sound very great. It does
you
sound
got to
good.
stick with, stay within yourself. And I don't try to do too much, Like
Hmm.
I have so many friends that are amazing singers in the city, and like when they sing jazz, because they also are coming out of like gospel and R&B, and they grew up in the church, and that comes through in their jazz singing. And some of my friends have these runs that they can sing, and it's like I hear them and it sounds like Kim Burrell like singing a jazz song, and I'm just like my jaw is on the floor, and I'm just like I would love to have runs like that, but I'm just like this
Hmm.
instrument cannot do that, so I'm not even gonna try, you know.
Would you okay, so I have a couple people asking a few questions. So the first question is from someone named Kirk. I can't pronounce your last name. And Kirk asks, does jazz education make cats play from the brain rather than their heart?
I mean, that's kind of what we were talking about, right? Like
Hmm. That
we
might have been late. I might have got that question late from
no,
him.
I mean, I think it's like we said, it has to be a combination. Like, you know, you have to know the scales and the chords, obviously, of course, but at the same time, if that's all you're doing and you're living in a practice room and you're not getting out and experiencing the music in that way, something's going to be missing. So someone else, I think, wrote a comment. They said like the answer is in the records. And
Yeah, someone said the answers in records. Yeah.
that means like listening to our
Hmm.
heroes. And before there was a degree for jazz education or jazz performance, what did people do? They just listened to the records over and over again, and they learned by ear. And so I just think it's a balance. You need to have both.
Sure. Another question is another person is asking a question. She's asking, I cannot pronounce her name. Asel, I think.
Hmm.
Asel Umid or Umid is saying, what about the new view of jazz music, not just following the standards?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of jazz is that it's a very democratic music. We say that jazz is like America's art form. It's black
Hmm.
gift to the world. And if we think of like what is America as democracy, so what that means is like working well with others to me. And when I think of jazz music, I look at Dizzy Gillespie being an ambassador for the United States government, going to Cuba and taking Afro-Cuban rhythms and percussion and melding that together with jazz. I look at
Mm.
Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock in the 90s, like making hip hop records. And that was the beginning of like what we see now with like, Robert Glasper and Kendrick Lamar and, Anderson,
Hmm.
all these kind of like hip hop artists that are combining with jazz. Jazz is
Hmm.
like this blueprint that you can like take any other form of music or style from around the world, and it just like goes together. Like jazz is like, jazz is the coffee, and then all the other styles of music are all the different milks. And like oat milk tastes good with coffee, almond milk tastes good with coffee, skim milk tastes good with coffee. I'm sorry, I was just like drinking coffee, so that's what came in my mind. But my point is that like the style of jazz that I would play at my concert is like standards, and like Cole Porter and George Gershwin and, I've Got Rhythm and Nat King Cole, Love, and Frank Sinatra, Come Fly With Me. That's like my personal style of jazz that I love the most. But even in New York City, like every night of the week, you can go see a jazz concert where it's like 1920s, everybody's in suspenders with little handlebar mustaches.
Oh, wow.
And then,
no, that's retro, but that's cool. It's like vintage. I'd like that.
Yeah, and the next night it's like jazz hip hop, and it's like MCs and producers showing up and people taking jazz solos. And the next night it's Brazilian jazz, and the next night it's Afro-Cuban jazz. So like, I think there are all these different like arenas of jazz.
So it's a lot of different subgenres of jazz.
Oh, yeah. I mean, whatever the question was, if like your view is like jazz, we need to take it in the new view, the new world. Jazz needs to incorporate this style. There probably is somebody out there doing it, But for me,
yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
The jazz,
does anyone? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Old school, But there's a lot of jazz out there. Jazz is going into the modern times, 100%.
Good. Is there anybody that puts rap with jazz besides like the jazz? Is there like a? What I'm wondering is like, is there like a hip hop duo where they do that? Like I know like Diggable Planets and stuff like that. But I'm wondering if anybody comes to that open mic or to that jazz place what you're talking about and is like, doing that.
Yeah.
I could probably do it with you.
There's a lot.
I could do one song.
I'm going to put this cat's Instagram in the chat, and I want you to check it out because he is one of the most ridiculous people that I've ever worked with. And he's like 20 years old. He's like a kid. But we did a tour together with Postmodern Jukebox, and he was the tap dancer on the tour. But he played.
Oh, wow.
He produces his own music. He's a singer. He's a rapper. He's an incredible tap dancer. And I've collaborated with him on a couple of his tracks where he's rapping, and I'm playing trumpet solos. And his name is Jabu. So I put in his Instagram. Everybody watching, go check out Jabu's music because he is like a perfect example of like, he's Gen Z, and he's combining like hip hop and rap with jazz. And then he tap dances like Gregory Hines. Like he's unbelievable, like talented I ever met. Check him out.
Awesome.
Love his shit. You should get him on Indie Spotlight. Tell him I sent you.
Okay.
His name
is Jabu World, right?
Yep. That's his IG.
Great. I'll definitely reach out to him if he has any times anything like that. I'll definitely reach out to him.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if there was anything else that I wanted to ask. So what bands and artists have you worked with? I know you talked about working with Jabu, but what bands and artists have you worked with now? Who are you working with now, and who did you work with in the past? We heard about a few people. We heard about Josh Groban,
right,
and we heard about Jabu, but
I work with I did a couple tours with Postmodern Jukebox. That's how I met Jabu.
Yeah.
And that was really fun because like, they take modern music. They take Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Whitney Houston, and they put it into a jazz rhythm. And
yeah, I checked out all their stuff. Yeah.
People love it. Like we did a tour. We were playing Europe for like 6,000 people in an arena. And it was jazz, and these were young people and they were having a great time. They were loving it. So I think I love that about Postmodern Jukebox, that like they can like take jazz and make it relatable to young people,
Yeah. It's just the funny, like what I noticed about like sometimes when I see people of my young generation or younger generation and they don't, you see how like they delivered the music, but like all the stuff, all the composing, all the pulling, all to make it like this and that. It's just like so much stuff goes behind the scenes. Like I see someone have a question. I think her name is Lucin Jazz.
Mhm.
It says, "What is a book about? What is a book about the jazz that made a strong impression on you?"
Wow, that's a great question. I love reading biographies and autobiographies, and
Hmm.
really good ones. The number one, obviously, is the Miles Davis autobiography. It's an amazing book. And Miles Davis is really like, you can follow the story of jazz is the story of Miles Davis from the 40s all the way to like the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, he is just like the source of jazz. And he also was like, had a crazy life, He was married to like Broadway stars, and he was, you know, hooked on drugs and then got off drugs, and he revamped himself so many times. And he's like the Jesus of jazz. He's like the god. So if you want to know about the story of jazz through the decades, Miles Davis is definitely a great place to start. And there's also a great biography by a saxophonist that passed away this past year called Jimmy Heath. And the name of that book is called, We Walked with Giants. They Walked with Giants. And it's an autobiography. And Jimmy Heath is another one who was like playing with John Coltrane and Charlie Parker in the 40s, but, just passed away last year and was playing the Blue Note in 2020. And he was like 93 years old. So he's lived a really colorful life too. So I love hearing stories about musicians that have been around since the beginning of jazz and kind of like them telling their experience.
The fun. Oh, I noticed that to just take one step back again about Miles Davis, we like um about like the people like the women that he married. I know he did marry Cicely Tyson, but
Yes.
she's gone now. So rest in peace to her. And also his wife, he had a wife named Betty Davis. And a lot of people don't talk about her, but I know like a lot about her. Like she was like a funk singer, and she was pushing the envelope, and she was definitely the blueprint for a lot of like people that are having like where you make like, like sexy funk music, strong front ground or strong vocalists and stuff like that. Definitely nothing like in the jazz world.
It's like Tina Chaka Khan before.
Yeah, or like Millie Jackson or something.
Yeah.
Um, so that was like a little bit. That's normally like what I tell like a lot of people, and I tell a lot of people like about how important like excuse me, how important like their music history is, just history and what type of
Yeah.
music that they
And
love or like to do.
you mentioned the Lee Morgan documentary on Netflix. There's also
Yeah.
a Miles Davis one that's really good.
Oh, great, great. So I'll definitely have to check that out. And I looked at a lot of stuff about like John Coltrane and his wife and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Um, By the way, I really, really think that they should have Idris Elba play John Coltrane.
Ah,
Hopefully that'll happen. No, hopefully that'll happen. And I literally want them to make like one about Lee Morgan too. And I don't know who would play Miles Davis, but
did
I
you
think they have maybe one.
did you see the Miles Davis one where it was Don Cheadle?
Don Cheadle, that's the one that I have to actually I've heard of that. I haven't really like looked at it yet. Like when he like came in like with the gun, he was like he wanted his money. I was like, yo, okay, like okay, all right.
Don Cheadle nailed the Miles Davis. Like he looked like him. He learned how to play the trumpet.
Mm,
So like that's a good one.
wow. So like you were saying like about you read a lot of people's biographies or biographies and stuff like that. And that's like how I learned about a lot of jazz history too. And it's just like so interesting. It's just like jumping down a rabbit hole. It's just so rich and so interesting. So I know that you're going to be playing a gig soon. So I know you're, um don't like I know that like your time is like, limited.
Oh,
So or like, you're pretty busy. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about anything else before like I wrap everything up.
you know what? I think we covered it. You got my my socials down there, my website. I covered.
Hmm.
I would just tell everybody, I'm vaccinated. I'm getting back out there. So check out my website or Instagram for where I'm playing next. I'm going to be in the Midwest in June. I'm trying to
Wow.
a little bit where I can, where it's safe. So just
Hmm.
Stay in touch, you know, DM me anytime. I'm addicted to my phone. I always,
So yeah, are we all? Yes. Everything's an app and everything's the internet and everything's social media.
totally.
So hopefully like yeah, like we'll meet up, we'll work together
Yeah,
or do something together. And I wanted to tell you that I'm thank you for coming on. I was very excited to talk to you and thank you for being very reachable, like so that I can like reach out to you,
my
you
pleasure.
know.
My pleasure. I always anyone can slide in the DMs. I will leave anybody in, I promise.
Okay, so guys, I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank Benny. I want to thank Benny Benack for coming on and telling us about some stuff and tell us about what he's up to. Go visit his website. Go download his music. And thank you for coming to the Indie Spotlight on Thursdays at 5 p.m. We have a fun-filled week, and thank you so much for coming on.
All right. Thank you, Shay. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you. Bye.